In this series, we're going to see how to build a custom URL shortener, so something similar to Bitly. This series is going to consist of two videos. The first video, which is this one, we're going to be building the backend application using Express for shortening the URL. So we'll be creating a post request, a get request, and all of those things. And in the second video, we are going to be creating a front-end application that connects to the backend application, so you can paste a long URL, get the shortened URL, share it, and I'll also give some future enhancements that we can do. So without further ado, let's go into the laptop and see how to build the Express server to go ahead and create our custom URL shortener. I've gone ahead and opened up the codebase in Visual Studio Code. In order to save everyone some setup time, I've gone ahead and uploaded the same codebase to my GitHub repository. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, so you can head on over to my GitHub repository, clone it, and follow along in this tutorial or in this video. In this video, we're going to build two endpoints. The app.post to the shorten URL, which will take the long URL, convert it to a short URL, and send that entire JSON object back to Postman. And in the next one, we'll see how to send it to the front end and render it over there. The next endpoint we're going to create is the app.get, which is basically going to take the short URL and redirect the user to the original URL. We'll build the app.get first, then we'll go to the app.post. In the app.get, the first thing we would want to do is initialize a variable called ID, or you can initialize it to anything you want. And in this one, we are basically going to get it from the request.params. Now that we have access to ID from the request.params, what we're going to do is introduce a try-catch block. Because we are interacting with Redis, it's always good to have a try-catch block so we don't end up accidentally killing our entire application if an error happens. We'll build a catch block, then we'll go over to the try block. So in the catch block, what we'll do is we'll just do a simple response.send e, or let's say internal server error, and then before the response.send, let's actually put a status as well of 500, and then below above that we'll just do a console.log of e, so we can do some debugging in case we come to line 46 and stuff. In the try block, what we're going to do is initialize a new constant called as cached data, and this is the data we're going to get from a Redis client based on the ID that's being passed. So we'll do await Redis client.get and then pass in the ID that we are getting in line 41. After this, we'll introduce a new variable called as parsed data, and over here we're going to call json.parse cached data. The reason we're doing this is in Redis everything is saved as a string, and we want to parse the string back into a JSON object so we can get the object that we actually need. In our case, it will be an original URL. So once we do that, actually before we do line 44, let's go ahead and cut that, and let's put an if block saying if cached data, then we'll parse the cached data into a parsed data. The reason we're doing this is sometimes our data may have expired, so we won't have anything in cached data, which will basically be null. So we don't want to redirect user to null because that doesn't make sense and may not be a good user experience. After we do this, what we'll do is we'll do response.redirect, and then we'll do parsed data.original URL. This original URL is the one that has been shortened into the ID that we are passing over here in line 41. And now, since we have an if statement to check if the data is there, we'll also create an else statement, and then we'll do a response.status of 404.send, and then over here we'll say URL not found. This will mostly happen when our Redis data has expired after the timestamp that we give. So then we'll just say that 404, the URL is not found. This usually won't happen in an actual production application because we'll be saving it in actual database. But over there also, if you're using a Redis client in order to speed up the request response, then this will be a good way of implementing that. Now that we have created our get endpoint. Let's move on to our post endpoint for shortening the URL. Over here, what we're going to do first is, again, we're going to initialize a constant, and we're going to call this as original URL. And over here, we'll basically be getting it from the request.body. After that, what we're going to do is we're going to check if our original URL is not empty. So we'll basically do we'll negate the original URL, and then we'll again negate the original URL, and then call .trim on it to ensure that white spaces are trimmed and it's actually not empty. Once we do that, we can just do a response status 400, which is for a bad request, and then we can do a send and say original URL is required. After this, what we'll do is we'll again initialize a try catch block, and then we'll complete the catch block and then go to the try block again. The catch block can pretty much be the same as what we created in the get endpoint. So let's go ahead and put that over here. Now in the try block, first what we want to do is create a short ID. So we'll create a constant called as short ID, and this will make use of the nano ID, and we'll pass in 5. So we'll get a 5-character string that will be part of our shortened URL. Now nano ID is similar to UUID, so if you're familiar with UUID, nano ID acts in the same way. After we do our short ID, what we're going to want to do is we want to ensure short ID is unique. So we'll initialize a new constant called as is short ID unique. So we'll do so this one we'll get it from a Redis client. So we'll do an await Redis client dot get, and then over here we'll pass the short ID. Then we'll introduce an if block. So if the short ID is unique comes back as true, what we are going to do is we are going to recursively call our shortened URL till we get a unique ID for our short ID. So the way we do that is we'll just call app.post, and then in the first parameter we'll pass in our endpoint, which will be the shortened URL. Then we'll pass in our request response as is over here, and this will recursively call the endpoint till we get a unique short ID. And assuming our ID is actually unique, what we'll do is we'll build a new constant called as URL data, and this will be a JSON object. So we'll put the ID as the short ID. The original URL will be the original URL we are getting in the request.body, and then the short URL is basically going to be built out as localhost :4000 / short ID. Make sure to put an HTTP in the beginning just so it actually treats it as a URL. So this is going to be the data we are going to send back to our front end, and also in the response when testing via Postman. Now what we're going to do is we're going to save this into our Redis database. So we are going to call await Redis client dot set ex, and then the first parameter is going to be the ID, so it will be short ID. Then we have to give it a timestamp or an expiration time. If we put it as 3600, that's basically 1 hour, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Then we'll do a json.stringify URL data. The reason we're doing json.stringify of URL data is because Redis saves everything as a string, and if we try saving the URL data directly, it's going to give us an error, so we'll have to parse it to a string, and that's why over here we are parsing it back to a JSON object when we are trying to get the value. After we save it to our database, what we can do is we can do a response.status 200, and then we can do .send URL data. Now that we have built both endpoints, let's go ahead and test it out and ensure everything's working without any issues. What I'm going to do is I've given a couple of bash commands that basically speeds up the process. So if you're on a Linux or a Mac OS system, you can basically run the bash backend.sh. If you're on a Windows machine, you would want to run the backend-windows.sh. So I'm opened up my terminal and basically going to run that command, and this will start my Express server on port 4000, and it also connects to my Redis client over here. Now I'm going to open up Postman and create a new HTTP request. The first one is going to be a post request, and this will be to localhost 4000 shorten-URL. Now in the body, what I'm going to do is basically create a JSON object, and since our shorten URL is expecting an original URL in the body, we are going to put original URL, and this will be the long URL we want to pass. So what I'm going to do is go to my personal website and then just copy one of the I don't want to open it in incognito, copy the link for this, and I'm basically going to paste it over here. Now when I hit send, you're going to see that it's going to give me a unique ID, which is 5 characters. That was the original URL, and this is the shortened URL. Now if I take this shortened URL and go to a browser and paste that, it's going to redirect me to the actual blog that I just copied. So if I click it over here, the same thing is going to show up over here as well. That will wrap up the first portion of this series. In the next series, we'll see how to create a front-end application to interact with our backend. I hope you like this video. Go ahead and hit the like button if you learned something new. Comment, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you all in the next series. Bye.